Hey y'all, I'm Elisa and I am the Scrappy Wife behind scrappywife.com, and today I have an art journal process video for you. I am still working in that same art journal trying to finish it up. Today I don't necessarily have a plan in advance, but I want to use some watercolors, so that's where I'm going to start. I will put you on fast forward. As always, whatever supplies I end up grabbing for, I will link below. Let me know any questions you have, but otherwise, let's go. I actually recorded this art journal process soon after one of my recent Take 10 videos. And if you haven't seen that, it is a new series that I started on my channel. I am aiming for Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. and each week I give one word as kind of a play word, a focus word, and I set a timer for 10 minutes and just play in my art journal using that word or that concept for 10 minutes. And the idea is to make sure you give yourself time to just play with your supplies and to have a great time and just experiment and not worry about an ending product, because I think a lot of times we're so intimidated by trying to create a product in the end that it's hard to even start. And so the idea of the Take 10 is to just play and have a good time and spend a little bit of creative time. I encourage you to do it every day, but of course the series is just once a week. So my most recent video was for Take 10 and the word was drip, and I was experimenting with all kinds of dripping and dripping with mixed media, and I continued that idea over here in my art journal. And you can see I'm playing with some watercolor. I'm using a bunch of water and allowing it to kind of just move down the page, and I like the idea of how it just travels and creates its own channels to move down and blends together. It's a lot of fun. I'm using water to kind of encourage it to move down the page, and then I just soak up the little excess drips with my paper towel so that it doesn't go farther than I intend for it to go. But I'm having a lot of fun just using the water to kind of encourage the color movement. And I start here with these warm colors. I have a deep purple and a red and what is actually a golden yellow, but it ends up kind of turning more and more orange as it mixes in with the red. And as I start to see some boxes forming, and to me it kind of looks like windows. So I decided to just stick with that same idea. My art studio actually looks out. I have a beautiful window in my room that looks out over the backyard, and I can see all kinds of trees, and depending on the day and the weather, there are all kinds of colors. So I like the idea of just seeing the colors outside of your window. So I'm experimenting with some different colors here, some shades of blue and green that again, I'm just gonna have kind of mix down and move down the page. I'm gonna stick in this loose block form. You can see some of my drips started to get a little bit out of control, and as they did, I just used the corner of my paper towel to soak it up. I don't want it to go into those channels too much, and I just keep adding and playing, and it's really relaxing and freeing to not be confined. That's one of the things I love about watercolor. You can't control it completely. It's gonna do what it's gonna do, and so it's fun to kind of work with it. It feels like you're kind of partnering with the watercolor to create your page. The watercolor set that I'm using is actually a Koi watercolor set, and it's one of their travel sets. It has 30 colors in it, and I love it. I've had it for 4 years now. It's the first set I bought when I began Bible journaling a while ago, and it is a nice quality of watercolor, but it also is affordable and it's very portable. It's easy to bring around with me. So I'm loving using these watercolors, and you can see I'm just adding another block down here in the corner, and then I'll end up adding a 5th block because in general for art you want to work in odd numbers. It's just a little bit more pleasing to the eye, and I wanted to create just a little bit more balance. So up here in the upper left I will add some different color, and you can see I'm kind of experimenting and I'm doing the colors in a different order. So this time I do the purple all the way to the left, and then I'm going to add that deep pink kind of red color, and then coming back in with the orange just to change it up. And again, I just use the water. So I rinse off my brush and I use water to invite the color down. I'm not brushing it down. I'm letting it kind of travel on its own. And I'm kind of using a dab technique just to get it moving, but I want it to kind of do its own thing, and I like that experimental feel. And you can see just playing with the water, letting it move around the page is a lot of fun, very relaxing. And then I'm just going to use my paper towel. You can see I'm using it to kind of block off that last window to make it more of the square shape that I was going for. Once I finished the basic blocks, I wanted it to dry, and then I'm adding some splatters, and I'm using each of the colors that I've used earlier, but I'm keeping them in certain spots. So you can see I started with the purple up there in the upper right, and then coming with the orange in the lower left, kind of that red magenta color in the top, and I'll add some green and blue. And I didn't want the splatters to mix too much. They're just to add an interesting texture and to help the color continue to move around the page. But I wanted to make sure they didn't mix with the wetness that was already there. And you can see I tried to dry, but over here in this last one, it wasn't completely dry in the corner. So you can see how that color immediately started to bleed. No big deal. I will blot some of it up, but I'll just continue to work with that color as is. At this point, I am really happy with the color that's on the page. I take my Micron pen and I'm very sketchily, I don't know if that's a real word, but I'm using sketchy lines to create my actual windows, because that was the kind of the concept that started coming up as the color was moving on the page. So you can see I'm just going to draw in my window squares and then continue to add some detail. I'm purposefully using very sketchy motions because I don't really trust myself to draw a straight line freehand, and I didn't want to pull out a ruler for my art journal because I wanted this to just be a more free feeling, free form thing. So I purposefully use that sketchiness just to I don't know, I guess to accommodate or kind of distract from my lack of straight lines, but I really like the look that I end up with in the end. I began adding in the window panes just to add a little bit more detail. Again, the sizes are a little bit off, but that's okay. It's just supposed to be sketchy, abstract. Again, this is kind of a window to the world feel. I just like the idea of looking out your window and taking in the colors that are all around you. No matter the season, I think there are interesting colors to be found. Right now it was kind of a wintry gray day outside, so these colors were very inviting to me because I was seeing a lot of grays outside. But even when I see those grays, there are a lot of gorgeous blues in the sky as well. And so I think it's fun to take note of those gorgeous colors. Once I have the basic window panes done, now I'm going to add a little bit of shading underneath each window. And I got a little bit off here. I'm not sure that this ended up exactly like I was hoping for. I just wanted a darker shade at the bottom of each to kind of ground the window, but the lines ended up being just a little bit too defined for me. You can see I'm kind of coming back and adding in some more water, and I really should have kind of just gone over it with a paper towel, soaked a little bit more of it up. It did lighten some as it dried, but the edges ended up feeling just a little bit harsh to me, and so I wish I had just been a little gentler. I'm going to come back with more water right here. You can see trying to soften up that edge, but in the end, when I add stamping over the top, it doesn't bother me. I was just looking for it to be loose and to just add a little bit of a shadow, like I said, kind of as a grounding for each of those windows. And again, I make sure it's completely dry before I come back with my Micron pen. And when I added the shading, I really wanted to darken up just a little bit. And this is actually when I ended up liking it a little bit more. I really brought down that black in a real sketchy way on the bottom into the watercolor. So I feel like it drew that watercolor in and really created the shadow look that I was going for. This is a stamp set that I have used multiple times. I love it. It's from Dina Wakley and it's called Love Birds, and it is these beautiful sketchy birds, and I thought they would be so cute just perched on my windows. And it's kind of, are they on the outside looking in, or is this a house of birds on the inside looking out? It's kind of a cool thought. And one of the things I love about these clear stamps is that you can kind of place them on the paper and get an idea of where you want them before you stamp it down, which is really nice for someone that has trouble visualizing. Sometimes I don't have a good idea of what it's going to look like, and so I like putting it on the page in advance. So I'm using 4 of the different stamps in this set. Of course, the sketchiness, the sketchy look of them goes perfectly with my window panes, and I like that I found a little perch for each bird to kind of sit and look around, and a couple of them are talking up there, and I imagine that they're kind of tweeting about what they are seeing out there in the world. Used the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. That's a great permanent ink and a great one to use in art journaling because it's not going to be affected by water later on. I loved the page how it was, but I was challenging myself to kind of go deeper and to add a little bit more. So these are actually pages torn out of one of those departure magazines, like the ones that are in the airplanes or in the airport, and I chose some of the pages that had some inspiring words on them, and I am just ripping. I'm not cutting. I want it to be messy, and so I'm ripping out some different phrases that I plan to kind of use on my pages. And I had a little bit of trouble with the ripping at times, and sometimes it got a little bit messy, but I didn't mind at all. I just am adjusting, and I like the idea of being able to art journal without a million supplies. So you can see I did most of this page with watercolors, a pen, and then this is not even using scissors. I had one set of stamps. It's fun to just kind of play with the different supplies and see how far you can go on one art journal page without using a bunch. Once I have all of my phrases kind of torn out, I start playing with their placement on the page, trying to find a good spot for each one to rest. And then I also realized that that word escape kind of has a dark background and the other two phrases have a light background, and so I'm wanting to balance it a little bit. So I pull out this phrase that says your dream, and I'm going to kind of balance the dark and the light so it moves around the page. Then I pull out my Liquitex matte gel medium, and this is a great medium for using as decoupage, adhering things in your Bible. I like that it's matte. In my experience, when I have things that have a satin finish or a shine to it, it tends to get sticky in my art journal and the pages stick together, and you can hear, if ever I get to do a flip through of this one, you'll hear a few of the pages kind of peel apart. And I've tried baby powder and I've tried a lot of things and I just can't get the stick to go away, and those are the pages that have some sort of shine to them in the finish. So here I'm just using this matte gel medium. I love this particular one. I'll make sure to link it below, and just making sure all of these are adhered down really well, and conveniently it covered up a couple of the spots of the windows that I wasn't too pumped about with that shadowing underneath. I feel like the couple of phrases that I have that have the dark backgrounds, the darkness kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere. So I'm going to add a little bit more black to this page, and I start with a Dilution shimmer spray in black, and I'm mixing it with some texture paste, and I'm mixing it here on my glass media mat, which I am loving for art journaling purposes. It is awesome. So I'm mixing it all up, and then I will use kind of I'll use just a little credit card, like a cutout tool that I'm just going to add through the stencil to add a little bit of texture to some parts of this page. It doesn't turn out to be like a jet black, because when you're mixing it with the white texture paste, then it ends up being a little bit of gray. But I like that it's bringing in just a little bit more darkness to kind of balance out those two words and bring them in. And then adding that texture layer is always just a fun thing to do on art journal pages. I feel like once it's dry, it does invite touch, and it invites you to just look a little bit deeper into the page, which I really enjoy. Now you see me just move my stencil to the side here at the end. This texture paste dries super hard, and it does dry pretty fast. So I was almost done with this page, but I immediately took my things to go wash them, and make sure you do that also if you're going to use this texture paste. Now, if you know me, I always have to have just a little bit of glitz, so I pull out some spray, and this is a spray from Art Anthology, and I believe it's called Gilded Gold, and I'm just adding a few spritzes, and I'm mainly aiming towards my birds just to give them a little hint of glimmer, but not a whole lot, not overdone, but I really like the just hint as you look on to see that the birds have just a little shine to them. And that wraps up this page. This one was a fun one to do, and also just a really relaxing one to work on. If you enjoyed this process, please give it a thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button. I would also love to hear from you in the comments below. I hope you have an amazing day, and as always, keep it creative.